Who doesn't love a great magical story? Harry Potter, the magicians. But what about these make them so great? How are they built? And if you want to write a magical school story, you're going to have to know what goes in there so that your magical school is thrilling and the reader keeps turning pages. By the end of this, you'll know what are the necessary components to create your own magic school so your readers will love it. I'm Ryan McRae. I'm a hopeful writer and voracious reader, and today we're talking about magical school tropes. I'm covering a bunch of books that have magical school tropes, and they might have spoilers, but they've been out, so it's hard to talk about them without actually talking about them. So here's what's on the docket. Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula Guin. I've got Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. I've got Percy Jackson by Riordan. Percy Jackson and the Olympians by Riordan. I've got Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling. You may have heard of it. I have The Magicians by Lev Grossman. And then I've got Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. I love this book. I'm on my second read of it. I think it's great. And then one of my all-time favorites is Babel by R.F. Kuang. I read this in just like a couple days and I loved it. All of these are pretty pure magical trope books. Harry Potter and Babel are the most notable, with Wizard of Earthsea having it, but it is very condensed in the book. But we can get to that. So we all know the magical school trope. We've read it, we've seen it, Harry Potter and the like. But why is it so popular? Hasn't it been done before? I just showed you a bunch of books that have it. Yeah, absolutely. And there's a ton of books I didn't mention. But I'm going to talk about why the magical school trope is popular, ongoing, and it's never leaving. I'm also going to talk about how as a writer, you can write a magical school book that people love, and I have to break down the components of the trope just so that it's easier to build. And I may have a rant along the way. So here are some reasons we love a magical school trope. We all love the trope because if we're going to go into a magical fantasy world, we don't want to have to learn a ton of stuff, lore, myths, characters with weird names like Boromir or Frodo. And when we see a magical school trope, a story about that, we think, oh, I get it. I've been to school before. I know what it's like. Because we tend to remember our first days entering school, the nervousness, the strangeness of it all. We had to learn procedures and maybe move from class to class. And we had to learn the society that was in the school, who were the cool kids and the terrible teachers. We had to compete in gym class and display our art, and we had to sing in front of other kids and do book reports. You have bullies, and you have gifted kids, and you have the teachers who are burned out and the ones that are new. When you think about it, it's really wild. Plus, it's super stressful for really everybody involved. But the magic system is now melded into all that stress, so we're both understanding it and we're also challenged by it. And as kids, we want to know, like, hey, how do you survive school? And I don't mean like in a Hunger Games kind of survival, but like, how do you get through it and change and develop? And when someone's reading a magical school book, they're also wanting to know what to do to get by. I think that's why Harry Potter exploded, because you had this trinity of wanting. You had Harry, the kid with abusive relatives, taking care of him, and you had Ron Weasley, who was poor, and Hermione, whose parents just didn't get her, and she was Muggle-born, and kids would be like, well, I'm either Harry, Ron, or Hermione, and away they went. And I'm going to get to having a protagonist that works on that magical trope later on. But it also cures the, am I the only one that thinks this place can blow? Because when we're kids or teenagers, we see the protagonist struggle, we feel like, yeah, man, you can do magic and you still struggle? Cool. Like, I guess we're just supposed to struggle. And we love the magical school story because we see ourselves in the protagonist. And it doesn't have to do with like race or gender or sexual orientation. It plays a part, but the baseline is that we can enjoy is, hey, I once went to school, it was tough, and I get it. So how do you write a magical school trope? Well, if you're gonna write a magical trope book, it has to have a structure that the reader wants to have. I know that sounds strange, but there are conventions and obligatory moments that this trope really demands. And I'm going to talk about the structure, the moments you have to have, so when the reader is reading that book, they really want to keep turning the page. And I've read a ton of magical school books, and I've seen the patterns. And I'm also in a writing program at StoryGrid that's helped me see these. So let's get started. The protagonist shows off early. In most of the books I've read, the protagonist shows their gift to do magic early. Percy Jackson can see mythical creatures and he shouldn't be able to, and Harry Potter removes the glass from the snake cage and can hear what the snake is saying. He didn't have a wand, so I guess that gets a pass. Ged from Earthsea uses power to get rid of barbarians invading his island. Quentin in The Magicians is really great at coin tricks, and he's pressed to do magic when he has to audition for the school. Now in Babel, Robin, the protagonist, doesn't show magic early because that sort of magic is all written down. So he simply doesn't display it. It's not that sort of magic where it's impulsive, where it comes out of you. That's more artifact magic. They write in silver in different languages on each side to generate magic. So, and you know, and but you understand that he's bilingual, so he has the capacity for magic. Plus, he has to keep that sort of under wraps anyway. In Amari and the Night Brothers, her power is frowned upon by the school, so it isn't displayed early. Thus, it sets it up for a big reveal. So there are some exceptions, but in most of the books I've read, the protagonist shows their magic early or their capacity for it, which would fulfill in Amari and in Babel. If the protagonist's power is to be displayed, then it simply is to give the reader an idea of this is what's up in the world, and this is the power we're talking about. In these books, the protagonist is not the norm. Your protagonist has to somehow be lower ranked than the rest of the people in your story. And I'm not saying it's right, but they have to be some sort of lower caste somehow. So like in Percy Jackson, has a stepdad that's a jerk, Harry Potter, dead parents, orphan, magician. Then the Magicians, Quentin has serious mental health issues. Ged's parents don't understand him in Wizard of Earthsea, and his dad beats him. In Babel, the mother dies early, so he's also an orphan. And then in Amari, she faces racism and judgment early on for being black, with a single mom who's overworked. On and on. Having a powerless protagonist gives the reader excitement that they've found magic, and that magic can possibly help them rise up. And I have news, it usually doesn't. People with privilege in the schools also have magic, and they find that they're usually in the same crappy system. Except for Harry Potter, because he's the boy who somehow can't lose in the first book. He's great at everything. Whatever. So that's the protagonist. So let's talk about the school itself. The school is an arena in which your student has to survive, thrive, and derive meaning in their life. No small task. Now, before you tell the story of your protagonist, you have to build the school, this labyrinth that the protagonist is going to have to live in. Now, the school can be one of two types, growth or hierarchy. Most of the books you've read about magic schools are probably growth hierarchy. The school wants the students to succeed. It acts as mostly altruism, and the better of the students are at magic, the more they can move up. The school is good. But some schools are about power, and these schools use the students for its benefit. It acts out of greed. Babel, this is a really good example of it. They aren't sharing power in this book. They're taking advantage of the students and hoarding power. In Naomi Novik's Schoolomance, the school is a danger to the students. The school itself is designed to kill the students if they don't learn fast enough. It's not great. Students die in that book, straight up. So you have to decide early on the story you want to tell. Is it about growth or power? And it makes a difference because it impacts your protagonist every step of the way. So one of the things you have to consider is like, how does the school get its students? If it's a school of growth, simply put, they just get invited, and the reader loves invitations. We loved in school getting invited to birthday parties and getting Valentines, all of that. And an invitation highlights free will. You get a choice. You get to choose. Are you going or are you not going? It's hero's journey, baby. An invitation to the extraordinary world. But it puts it in the hands of the protagonist, and it shows the school is not about really being shady. But if it's power, the kids are abducted. Babel and Schoolomance show this. Now, not all the kids are abducted in Babel, but some are, and our protagonist is. It shows they're like, screw your free will. You will work or serve here. You're contained. It tells the reader not a great situation, but hey, there's magic. How bad could it be? Spoiler, it's bad. So now if you have a nice growth school, you have to write an invitation scene. Now, if you have a school that isn't great, that's about power, then you have to write some sort of abduction scene into it. Now, Hunger Games is sort of a school trope. Candace is abducted as well by the Capitol, and she ends up destroying it eventually. It is a power dynamic. There's no magic because it's strictly in the dystopian section. But again, it shows off, hey, this is what happens with power dynamics. And she briefly goes to that weird little academy in the first book before they start to kill each other. So the other thing is you have to tell the reader that the school is not safe. And it doesn't matter if it's power or growth, but it does get fine-tuned. In your magic school trope, the school isn't safe. It's dangerous for the students at every turn. Trolls roam the campus. There's students that are a threat. Stuff comes from outside the school. And the reader wants the protagonist to experience these threats because, well, school sucks. And, you know, I got news for you. School is not safe. If it's growth, the threat is coming from outside in. In Harry Potter, it's usually the dark arts teacher. In Magicians, they summon the beast from outside, and it kills a ton of the students. Way to go, Quentin. In Amari and the Night Brothers, who are the threat, you know, along with the agents they've employed. So they're coming from outside in. Since the school is good, the overall force of antagonism is against it. So, and it wants to either destroy the school or take it for its own. But if it's power, then the school is the force of the antagonism, and the call is coming from inside the house. The students have to deal with the constant threat. Sometimes it's covert, sometimes it's overt of the threat. In Babel, it's super overt. It's not obvious that the school is bad because the people that work there possess such power. But, as you may have heard, power corrupts. Another part of this is that schools divide the students. Every school has cliques, and even the school splits students into their academic rigor. If a magic school didn't do this, the reader would be very confused and say, this isn't normal. It sets up a quick download of information that, hey, this is the kind of student that they are. In the Magicians, you had physical kids, the psychics, and so on. In Harry Potter, you have the houses, Ravenclaw, and the like. They all have them somewhat. So in your story, the students are either divided up by either their power or their character. Now, I don't mean power like, hey, if they're divided by power, that's like the power dynamic. No. For powers, like their actual magic powers. So you have the Magicians, Amari and the Night Brothers, School of Mance, Wizard of Earthsea, and Percy Jackson, which is weird because if they have the same powers, then they have the same god or goddess as their dad, so that makes it weird. If it's character traits, you have Harry Potter, but also School of Mance because they have conclaves that define like what region they come from. And in Babel, you just had to pick what sort of study you were interested in, and then that's who you just were. If you pick character as the choice, you have to have a rivalry already built in, like, hey, we're better than you. Characters just tend to be territorial and confrontational in the arena where it's character. And these tend to be series that takes place in a school all the time. So then you're surprised when someone acts out of character for their designation. So if it's by character, you really have a zinger to surprise someone. No one's surprised that a Slytherin is conniving, but if a Hufflepuff straight up murders someone, then you're like, whoa. So, and it just speeds up getting to know the characters. Whereas Powers, it's less political and more united, but you can have more deception out of the gate. Who's the guilty party? Amari has a good twist because everyone's like, all powers are good. And then she gets hers and people are like, your power is bad, which is clearly intersectional to the themes of racism in the book. So you can hide people in with powers much more out of the gate. If it's character, you're going to have a really hard time breaking out of that. It has to be a very one-off thing. And then another component of this is the naming ritual that has to happen in every single magic book I've read. The naming ritual. You need some kind of naming ritual that, like the Giver has it, Divergent has it. It can be argued that the drawing in the Hunger Games is a naming ceremony. It's a little bit of a stretch, but the naming ceremony is a convention in your book and an obligatory moment that just has to happen. It's formal. The students are expecting this, so everyone kind of puts on their best attire. It's sacred. It's mentioned usually before the student shows up, so they understand what's happening, but not everything, so it's a nice place to have some misunderstandings. The tension's high, everybody's in attendance. You also allow the reader to see the hierarchy of the school. You can see the leaders. You can see the inner workings of the school and how it functions. The leaders usually speak to the purpose of the school, its values. It's where you learn what's going on. And you get a tour of all the other students who are in the same boat as the protagonist. The reader can then learn important names you feature. But you don't have to feature everyone, though, because it's kind of boring if you're listing every single character in a naming ceremony. You can just keep it nice and tight, and you don't have to say, oh, I know Bill from the naming ceremony and Janine from the naming ceremony over and over. Your protagonist has to make a choice or be surprised at some point. If everything goes to plan, it's totally boring. Harry pleads not to be in Slytherin, and I would argue that every character in Harry Potter, when they put on the naming hat, has a choice to choose which house. I don't think Harry is indeed special in that way. I think Hermione had a choice, but I think everybody does. It's a free will thing. I'll go to my grave on that one. Triss in Divergent chooses a different group. I know it's not a magical academy, but it does a naming ceremony. She chooses the Dauntless. Amari's powers get revealed in the naming ceremony as being she's a sorcerer, so nobody likes that. So that was a nice twist. Quentin gets this really lame little power in his, but it winds up being fantastic later on. It can't go to plan, that naming ceremony, because the reader is like, so what? It just can't be normal. Somebody has to make a different choice than expected, or something intriguing happens. And it really can't be massive, because usually this takes place the first 10-15% of the book. Maybe, I bet in Harry it's like 20%. But it should throw the protagonist way off balance, or the other ones, their loved ones watching. Overall, it's a signal to the reader. You have to pay attention. This is important. We're going to get a look at the school that only happens once a year. And naming rituals happen in our schools. You get this grade, you get put in this class, you go to school assembly. So it's just not as cool as these. You also have to have a really strong scene that the school is unsafe. Something is threatening the school, and your protagonist is rightly gifted or called to deal with the issue. If it's a power hierarchy, the school itself is the threat to the protagonist. In Schoolomance, it's like, hey, the school's going to kill you if you're not good enough. And Babel, the school wants you to serve so that people can be subservient to it. If it's a growth hierarchy, the threat is coming from outside the school. Voldemort, Ares, the Beast, the Night Brothers. And they hate the school. They didn't get accepted, or they hate someone in the school, something. They just need they need to have a strong emotional connection to the school, just so that they can get revenge and payback. And there's always this misunderstanding about the threat at the start. Who the antagonist is, the villain, why they're so mad, their plan, something. The protagonist is usually like, it has to be this person, and it's never ever this person. And then you find out, like, it's actually that person. And it's usually explained at the, when the hero is at the mercy of the villain, the whole story. Like at the end of Harry Potter. Now, the protagonist is the chosen one. I mean, I know we know that, but they have different purposes depending on the power or growth situation. If it's power, the school's bad, they have to destroy the school so that evil can stop happening. That's their overall purpose. If it's growth hierarchy, they have to rescue the school so that good can continue. The protagonist is the person who has the gifts to destroy or save the school. Now, the other thing I've noticed is the protagonist cannot solve it by magic alone. In the myriad of books I've read, the protagonist can't just cast a new spell that saves the day. The protagonist has to somehow transform when they're fighting the villain. They have to be at this like all is lost moment, and then they can use magic, but it has to be something they've never done before. They can come to a realization about something. It can't just be, I'm going to use this spell that I learned in class. It has to be, here's a spell I know, and I'm going to use it differently than before. Or I'm going to do something that is unexpected that really leads to their transformation. I can't emphasize it enough. Amari does a fantastic job of this. So I'd read the whole book, but the last couple chapters are chef's kiss. Because like she realizes that her powers are hers and hers alone and can't be judged. They're for good because she decides it, not because of what other people tell her. Harry Potter realizes that that connection is what differentiates him from Voldemort. And he doesn't know this on a conscious level, but he connects with people throughout. He only defeats the puzzles with Ron and Hermione's help to get to the Sorcerer's Stone. And he chooses to align with people that are different from him, where Voldemort only aligns with people who are very similar. Now, in Magicians, they fail to beat the beast, but one of the members sacrifices themselves to finally stop him. In Babel, they use forbidden magic to sacrifice themselves, destroy the school. And yes, the school gets destroyed at the end. It's in the title of the book, so don't come at me. In Schoolomance, the protagonist Elle needs to be a loner because of the type of magic she has and what people have prophesized about her. But in escaping the school, she is forced to bring people together. She has to bring more people in to formulate the plan, a lesson she has to keep learning as stakes get bigger and bigger. So yeah, the protagonist has a lesson to learn, and that's the transformation. The transformation defeats the villain. Now, when it comes to the protagonist allies, the ones you have with them, the ones who are like in the inner circle, they need to be outcasts of the school as well, or rebels. They bear a social stigma from the school and its culture. In Babel, it's where his friends are from. His tightest ones are from uncivilized countries, according to Britain. In Harry Potter, Ron is poor. Hermione doesn't come from a wizarding family, so they know what it is to be on the outside. Percy has Annabeth that people just don't like, and Grover, who's a satyr. Quentin in The Magician has Alice, who's socially awkward. You have Elliot, who's polyamorous and really into drugs, and Janet, aka Margot, who's just upfront and blunt about everything. She's kind of mean. Now, they clearly have to be fully developed people, characters in your story, but having them be a lower social class than the rest is key so that the protagonist and the rest of them can display empathy and give them something to fight for. They'll understand oppression and being an outcast. And if your allies of your protagonist are at the top, they don't have much to fight for. Now, I have seen in Percy Jackson and Babel, as well as Amari and the Night Brothers, if the friend is of a strong social class, they're most likely the betrayer, and they're in it for some other reason. They're breaking through the top of their game to be accepted in another circle, a more devious and powerful one. So that's all I've got. If you love reading fantasy and talking about writing as much as I do, you've come to the right place. Don't forget to sign up for my newsletter below to stay updated with my latest content. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And I'd love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments what magical school book you dig. I would love to add it to my collection. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.